I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we are not the embodiment of evil. Maybe just a little. I'm Anna Bogutska, co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. If you're new to the show, welcome. In real life, the Final Girls put on events and screenings that explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. And on the show, we take a horror trope in depth and throughout a whole season, rip it apart, rummage around in its thematic entrails, and figure out why it works, if it holds up, and what it says about wider horror culture, which is a long-winded way to say that basically we look at horror movies in depth. In this 4th series of the podcast, we are looking at teen horror, how it's evolved, and why teenagers, and especially teenage girls, make some of the most compelling protagonists in the genre. So we are going all the way from the original slasher films of the 70s to the most recent teen horror movies. But before we dive into our film this week, quick reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Final Girls UK for updates, event announcements, horror memes. We also have a Patreon where you can support our work, get occasional bonus episodes if I'm not completely drowning in deadlines. And on that note, we are super pumped to announce that we're doing a live podcast recording. On the 20th of October at the Prince Charles Cinema in London, we'll be screening the original Scream from a 35mm print, and directly following that, we'll be recording our episode about that film. It'll be a crossover with my other favorite horror podcast, The Evolution of Horror, where Mike Munzer and myself will be joined by the fantastic Becky Dark on stage to talk about all things Scream. Basically, it'll be a night where Mike and I fight over Becky in public. Tickets for this are on sale now, and they're already flying, so if you live in London, do come along. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be really good fun. But back to the film today, we are covering one of the OG slashers, the film that confirmed and perfected a lot of the tropes that would become synonymous with the genre. The final girl, the unstoppable killer, the lurking danger in suburbia, the horny teens getting slaughtered, the completely absent parents. Even with all the remakes, reboots, and sequels, there is no disputing the influence and importance of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill's Halloween. If you're new to the show and have never seen Halloween before, please know we spoil everything about the movie pretty much from the very beginning. We also kind of spoil Halloween 6, but no one needs to see that really, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Joining me on this episode is the fantastic Steph McKenna, and with her we talk about our love for Halloween, John Carpenter's music, everything the film did that proved to be so influential for decades onwards, and not sure how, but we ended up going full Valley Girl. And with all of that said, please enjoy our take on Halloween.
You may think they scare me, you're probably right. Black cats and goblins on Halloween night. Trick or treat!
Steph, it's so lovely to have you back on the podcast. How have you been?
Anna, I'm good, thank you. I'm really well. How are you?
I am slightly sweating because it's been unusually hot today. Not on board with this.
It's a bit stuffy, isn't it? I'm a bit sweaty, but I did a rush home from work, so it's my own doing, really.
I mean, I work from home now, and so I've got no excuse. I was just rushing from
one room to the next.
Yeah, not even that. Before we start talking about Halloween, arguably the teen horror movie.
Yes, with a capital T.
In all of teen horror and in all of horror. Can you try and recap what Halloween is about?
Yes. I mean, fortunately, it's a pretty streamlined story. So this time I haven't chosen a film that's like insanely difficult to describe. So this film, on Halloween night in the town of Haddonfield, 1963, a teenage girl called Judith is stabbed to death by her 6-year-old brother, Michael. Then 15 years later, in 1978, that great evil that is Michael Myers, escapes the Smithsgrove Sanitarium where he has been incarcerated, and he makes his way back to Haddonfield in order to hunt and kill his next victims, who are teenage babysitters.
Hot.
Dun dun dun! That's some hot shit.
So, Steph, what is your relationship with Halloween? Why did you pick it?
Why did I pick it? It's such a biggie. You know, I mean, obviously, like everyone, I absolutely love Halloween. And I remember watching it in my fairly early teens. I want to say probably 14, after kind of being initiated into the world of horror films through 90s teen slashers, of course. So I started with the later slashers. So Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer,
Yes.
Legend. Remember watching them obsessively. And then kind of worked my way backwards, as you do, as a lot of people do as kind of teen viewers. So watched Halloween as kind of the granddaddy of the genre. And I know I enjoyed it at the time, but when I was younger, it was definitely more about how far I could push myself in terms of watching something sort of scary or gory or jumpy. So I think at the time I didn't quite appreciate it as like an amazing exercise in tension. And it was as I got older that I really began to appreciate it more. And it's kind of within the past 10 years that I really think it cemented itself as one of my favourite films. So it's one of those weird ones that I'd regard as a comfort film, like a horror film that you can watch multiple times a year. Like I think I've probably watched it 3 times this year. And I love the film itself. I also love the story behind it, the kind of, the fact that it was small budget and independent, the sort of the work between Carpenter and Deborah Hill, the mask, the holiday setting, the whole sort of community and legacy around it as well. This whole world that's been built up around it that I absolutely adore. And then, I guess every few years I kind of end up coming back to it because you get some sort of Halloween adjacent property, something pops up, whether it's like good example is the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross remix of the Halloween theme that came out the other year. Just completely obsessed with that. Listened to that for ages. Like the 2018 David Gordon Green film. Like these things pop up every few years, and it kind of takes me back to the original. So just adore it, really.
It's a slasher film that just will not die.
It won't.
But it's really funny hearing you talk about how you came to it, because I think actually I kind of came to Halloween ass backwards in a way.
Yeah. Did you?
Where I had my entry point into horror was Nightmare on Elm Street, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in the series. But I knew nothing about that film. It completely blew me away. I was a tiny child. I was like 8 or 9 when my cousin showed me that film. Like, a bit too early, right? So I know, explains a lot though, but let's not get into that. But Halloween, I think I actually, again, as a teenager, same as you, kind of fell in love with teen slashers of that time. Your Screams, all that stuff, love them. And obviously they take so much from this film, but I didn't know that. So I kind of saw the films influenced by Halloween before I ever got to see
Yes.
Halloween itself. And I think I
Absolutely.
actually saw some of the sequels before I saw the original.
Yeah, that would you end up watching Halloween H2O?
Yeah, totally. And I was like, oh, who the fuck is this? But, you know, when you're kind of seeing the worst versions of a true horror classic. But I think my as I tried to kind of remember, I think my entry point was actually Carpenter. Like, I had discovered Carpenter when I was in university already, and I kind of worked my way through his films, and I loved his weirder horror films, like In the Mouth of Madness. I think was one of the scariest trailers I've ever seen.
I don't think I've seen the trailer for that.
Oh my god, like that trailer haunted me for years. I was afraid of watching that film. And that was my entry point into Carpenter. And then like worked my way backwards to actually probably one of his most influential films and one of his simplest films as well. And similarly to you, like I'll revisit it every once in a while, and I've done the Halloween marathon and all that jazz. But every time I watch it, and I rewatched it today before we were gonna record, and it's like, fucking hell, this film is so elegantly made. It is,
Isn't it?
So simple and yet so effective.
It is amazingly, for such a small budget production, something that was put together really quickly as well. It's just, it is really sleek. It's like minimalist and sleek, and I just adore it. I just think it's great.
I mean, it's like you can really see and trace back to Halloween, and you know, arguably Black Christmas in many ways, and we'll talk about that as an influence, but you can really trace back literally so many tricks and tropes that have then become staples of the horror genre, and particularly staples of teen horror as well. So shall we start there and kind of talk about what are the things that made Halloween so original for 1978 when it was released?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even know where to begin. As you say, like so many tropes and cliches of teen horror, and specifically kind of slashers, which are a very teen adjacent, teen orientated sort of genre, feel like they originate from Halloween. And you mentioned Black Christmas, which was sort of 74, so just beforehand. And then you've got Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street as this kind of like holy trinity of the slasher. But yeah, with Halloween, I mean, firstly, you know, it's, as we kind of touched upon, Carpenter managed to do something so tense and disturbing and slick on like a shoestring budget, and managed to pump it full of kind of filming techniques and just like really original ideas that we've seen in, you know, films for like decades since. But for me, it's original because it placed teenagers and teenage girls kind of front and center of this story. So we spend time with Laurie and her friends. We get to know them as people and all of their concerns about school and cheerleading and sex and the dance and boyfriends and all of that kind of stuff. But they're also pretty feisty. They're kind of, you know, they might be studious and reliable babysitters, but they're also sexually active. They're smoking and swearing. So it's that kind of like the synergy between sex and violence that feels like a key aspect of the slasher and sort of teen horror in general. And also, you were mentioning, like, you can almost scene by scene with this film. It's like you're walking through a film of cliches, except they're not cliches because this is where they began. So you've got like the girl in the classroom looking out of the window, like Myers behind the washing line, and then disappearing when Laurie looks back, and like, you know, I'll be right back, like the classic lines that, you know, have been sort of reused and recycled in Scream and all of those kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of others, like the classic post-coital kill of kind of Linda and Bob, the wardrobe hiding scene. Like all of these scenes are like, if you saw them now in a film, you go like, oh, these have been done 1,000 times before, but this is where they originated.
And it's the stalker POV that really kind of stands out for me, which again kind of has been recycled so many times, but it's kind of staggering. I was watching this film today and like actually looking at the running time, be like, we don't actually get to the Laurie obsessive murdery stalky vibe until quite late on, like literally till the last 20 minutes. But throughout
it is
throughout the entire first half of the film, we just see through Michael's eyes, we just see him stalk her and just look at her and edge in like closer and closer. And you know, these kind of you know, these memes and videos that circulate on the internet, like on Instagram and TikTok, of where, you know, you look at like a dog or a cat and they're sort of far away, and then the camera moves a little bit, and then they're a little bit closer, and then they're a little bit closer, and they're just in your face, and they jump in your face. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I was seeing it. It's like, it's so simple, but just because it's so clear, and because it's like shot in the middle of the day as well, this beautiful leafy suburbia, but the music and knowing what world you're in, like, this is a horror film. We've already seen Michael Myers kill a bunch of people, including his own sister. We must go back to that opening, but it's like you're kind of looking around, be like, is he hiding behind that bush? Is he hiding behind that hedge? Is he behind that car? And you're kind of struggling all the time to see, like, where is he? And I even jumped today at the scene where you're kind of freaking out, being like, where the fuck is he? Where is Michael Myers? And then he just comes into frame kind of from behind you almost, and just stares at Laurie walk away. And it sticks so long on that shot. It's terrifying. It's like he was you. Like, you were watching her kind of from his point of view in a way.
Yeah, the use of framing in this, and it's the point of view perspective, isn't it? Like, and the kind of framing, as you say, with you find yourself as an audience member searching every frame of this film to see where he is in the corner. It reminds me of, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but It Follows is another film. Yes. It feels like it takes from this so much, because you're constantly watching everyone walking in the background, like, what is going to happen next? You're sort of on the edge of your seat, waiting for that kind of next jump scare. And for me with this film, it's not actually about the jump scares. It is that horrible tension. It's that rise and fall of tension the whole time, where you feel like you're being led into a dangerous situation, and then sometimes it kind of drops off. So, you know, there's the bit where Michael Myers is stalking the young boy, what's his name, Bobby, is it? When he's at school, he's kind of curb crawling him, and you think, oh my God, something awful is going to happen, and then he dries off. Or, you know, Laurie answers the phone, and there's no one on the end of the line. You think, oh my God, he's called her up, he's prank calling her on the phone, and then it's Annie. Like, it's like a constant rise and fall. And as you say, like, a lot of it's happening in the daytime as well. So a good, I don't know, probably half of this film is happening on a really sunny day in a beautiful suburban neighborhood. And these people are going around, you know, living their lives, and they feel perfectly safe and secure and happy. And there's this absolute evil lurking behind them, behind every hedge. It's just,
And we have to talk about that opening, since we're talking about POV shots. And the kind of the first bit of Halloween is Michael Myers' first murder, when he was a baby serial killer.
He's a tiny, tiny boy. Yeah, and again, you jump straight into it. Like, this film is so, I keep saying slick. I don't mean slick, but, you know, within the first kind of 5-10 minutes, everything is laid out and established for you. And that amazing first scene in, Halloween night 1963, where you're seeing the events unfolding through an unknown person's eyes. And I think your gut instinct is to assume that it's like basically a pervy older guy. I think when I first watched it, I was like, who is this absolute old man creep watching these poor teenagers have sex? And then you're, you know, led through the house, through all of these safe spaces, you know, into the kitchen, into the living room, through this person's, through this mask. I think he puts on the mask, doesn't he? So he's wearing the mask as well, before the big reveal at the end.
And it's terrifying, because it's like, oh, not only have we just seen a girl get stabbed, but also she's been stabbed by a little boy dressed as a clown, might I add, just like layering on the weird vibes. And also just this completely expressionless little boy. And then it kind of makes it both less and more terrifying for me, because then when we're introduced to Michael Myers escaping, we don't really see his face, we just see his silhouette. He grabs the mask pretty early on. But our only image of him is that little boy dressed up with a bloody knife in his hand and kind of completely vacant. I don't know about you, but I found it like quite chilling, because even conceptually, then you just continuously think of that little boy who just
Yeah.
only wants to stab people, to kill people. Like, there's no reason, there's no deep psychology, there's no, and it's kind of uniting that thing of like, oh, little kids are supposed to be our markers of innocence, but this little kid out of nowhere and absolutely with like zero expression of remorse or even of desire to murder just wants to keep on killing.
Yeah, he's just like a machine, isn't he? And as you say, part of the terror there is that there's no motive behind it. There's no reason behind it. He's literally murdering his sister at home whilst his parents are away. It doesn't make any sense. It's not explained to us. It's basically a mystery why he is the way he is. And he's born and he's growing up and living in this perfectly well-adjusted, lovely middle-class American society. So, somehow this monster has been born in amongst them and they've created it. And it's kind of like, where has he come from? What have you done?
And let's stick on Michael Myers and kind of talk about him once he reemerges kind of as an adult and he escapes from the mental institution where he's been held for literally his entire life. And once we kind of start seeing him around, his image has now become so iconic, but it was extremely deliberate by Deborah Hill and Carpenter to like design him in the way that he was designed, with the bleached William Shatner mask and the kind of the blue working man, workers boiler suit that he's wearing. So what do you think about the way he moves, like the presence of him, like the design of him? Why is it so scary? I know it's a little bit tough because now we've had over 30 years of Michael Myers content.
It's kind of, again, it's kind of the simplicity of it. And as you say, it was this Captain Kirk mask that they've modified and sort of stretched the eye holes and altered its hair, and I think it was like a $2 mask or something from a costume shop. But it's the blankness. You've got, as you said, you've got the child who was kind of blank, stony faced, vacant eyes, and then you've put this mask over him and he's kind of completely faceless, and there's almost no detail to him. And in fact, I don't think you even see the mask itself properly for quite a long time. It's like a good hour. I think the first time you see it sort of in any kind of detailed way is when he's stalking Annie. So there's just so much about him that feels like an empty space to me. Does that make sense? It's kind of, it's not even a him, it's an it. Like Loomis refers to him as it, and it, the evil. It isn't a man. Like, he's not a human being. He's not the human beings that we would recognize. He's just this kind of faceless void of evil.
Because Loomis talks about him in almost like not supernatural ways, but kind of like he calls him the embodiment of evil, but because there's nothing there, like there's no reaction, there's nothing to psychoanalyze. He's like talking to Michael Myers is like talking into the abyss. I think he says like
no conscience, no reason, that kind of thing. It is like if you're looking at him, I don't know, you're looking at him and there is nothing there. There's nothing left.
And it's
empty.
It's really funny because like even in the credits of the film, he's not called Michael Myers, he's just called The Shape.
Oh, he's The Shape, isn't he? In Nick Castle as The Shape, which is, and he's so huge. He's really huge. Big. Yeah, he's big, and he's he takes his time as well. Like, there's no rushing.
Yes!
He's kind of everywhere. He is always there. He's always just behind you. He always manages to keep up, but he's not. He's not running after you. This isn't like a zombie film, like he's chasing after you high speed. Yeah. He's just a constant presence. He's always somehow slowly and casually gonna get there.
It's slow, but it's relentless. And I love that you bring that up because like there's this scene towards the end where he's chasing Laurie and she's like rushing out of the house and she's trying to get into her neighbor's house as well, and she's rushing and running around like screaming her head off.
She's pegging it, isn't she? And he's
just leisurely strolling towards her, absolutely not a spring in a step at all. He's like taking his sweet time and still remains terrifying because even though he looks like he's not going to catch up, he slowly starts inching towards her, which is exactly the same kind of fear that It Follows uses as well, where it's like they move really, really slowly, but they just won't stop. So eventually they will get, because the victim or the person that they're trying to chase will have to stop at some point, but they won't.
Right. Like you will tire out, you'll need to stop, or you'll run out of places to hide, and somehow it's that supernatural quality again, isn't it? Like somehow he's always going to know where you're trying to hide or where you're running to, and he's always going to catch up with you. I think I've creeped myself out a little bit now just talking about it.
And I actually read that Nick Castle, who plays him in the film, was like, all the direction that he was given was go from this point to this other point, do this. Like there's no method acting on his part. Like I think both Hill and Carpenter deliberately tried to direct him in a way where he was as inhuman as possible, just functional and relentless, like some sort of weird killing machine.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is. Like it's his one mission in life. Doesn't need to eat, doesn't need to sleep. He just gets on with the killing. But,
even though, like, I did want to ask you, like, there's so much faff, I think, made in the coverage of the Halloween franchise, and especially now because we're kind of, less than a month away from the new Halloween being released, Halloween Kills. And the latest thing, I haven't watched any trailers. I don't want to watch any trailers for Halloween Kills. I just want to watch the film. But I saw the headline of like Michael Myers is unmasked in the new trailer for Halloween Kills, and I was thinking, he was unmasked in the first film. Why is this a big deal now?
Yeah,
and I do find it really interesting, like how so many of the films make such a big deal about what's behind the mask, but I find that the moment where his mask is sort of briefly ripped off in this film, it really doesn't matter. Like it adds absolutely nothing. Like it's completely vacant underneath the mask.
It really is, isn't it? I almost forget when I watch the film actually that there is a moment of unmasking at the end, because as you say, it's not really a big reveal. It doesn't matter. So I occasionally I forget that that's coming, and then it's like, oh yeah, she does pull the mask off at the end, and he's kind of the same underneath. He's just humorless and blank, and there's just nothing there.
We've spoken a little bit about kind of like we'll talk more about the films that it influenced, but can you see kind of influences from previous horror films that Carpenter has taken and kind of infused in Halloween?
I guess Psycho gets brought up quite a lot, doesn't it? So Psycho's sort of seen as the first like really early example of a slasher film, and it's got the kind of disguised masked killer that's sort of stalking people. So you can kind of see the Psycho influence, and I can definitely see the Black Christmas influence. That's the one for me that I think about a lot, and that has that feels like it has a lot of some of the elements that Halloween sort of takes and runs with. So the stalking of the female victims, it's the kind of like it's coming from within the house, the first person perspective, those kinds of things.
And it's got like the POV shots are very giallo as well. Yeah. I don't know if you're a fan, but like they love a POV shot, especially from the killer's point of view when he's like stabbing some women. But I do love the story. I wrote about this and I hadn't heard about the story until I was researching the piece that Carpenter actually had a phone call with Bob Clark.
Yes, I read about this.
Yeah, the director of Black Christmas. And he was like, so what would happen in a sequel if you were to make a sequel, mate? Not for anything, but what would happen?
Yeah, just wondering. No reason. Just how would you do this? Yeah, absolutely.
And apparently he's quoted, like this is on the record, he's quoted as saying this. Bob Clark said, like, it would be the next year and the guy would have been caught, escaped from a mental institution, go back to the house, and they would start all over again.
Okay, so that's kind of the plot of Halloween. Does Bob Clark get any kind of royalties for this film?
I'm not sure.
I think he gave you the idea there.
I know, but like I love the fact that these films are connected like stylistically, but also that the filmmakers spoke to each other and were very open about how they had that conversation and how the films speak to each other, because it was only a few years later, and Carpenter was nowhere near the first choice for directing this film either.
Oh, I don't think I even realised that he wasn't like a first choice. I know he was kind of approached over it, and it was kind of pitched as an idea to him, and that he originally kind of wanted to make a haunted house film, which I think he gets the haunted house in there anyway. There's definitely the Myers house is definitely a haunted house, but
it's got that haunted house vibe, yeah. But I do love the fact that Halloween never, well, in this film at least, we're not going to talk about Halloween 6 where the rooms and shit come up, but it kind of always skirts around the supernatural. There's nothing supernatural in it except, arguably Michael Myers, who just seems unkillable and unstoppable.
Yeah, it's like the only way to rationalize what he's doing, saying like, well, there must be something supernatural about him, because like someone can't be shot 6 times and then fall out of a window and then get away with it. But as you say, yeah, there's nothing overtly supernatural happening there, and there's no explanation for it.
And the other kind of connection that, again, is very obvious, but I also quite love, is the fact that, you mentioned Psycho, which obviously...
Oh, of course, yes.
Stars...
Yes, that's quite a big one, isn't it?
It's quite a big one, yeah. But Janet Leigh obviously is Jamie Lee Curtis's mum, and she was a really big star at that time. So it was a really big thing that she had top billing in Psycho, and then was killed off after the first 30 minutes.
Yeah,
but Jamie Lee, this was essentially her first role. It's definitely her breakout role as Laurie Strode. What did you make of her?
I mean, the irony kind of Laurie Strode being the final girl when, of course, her mother didn't make it through Psycho. Is, amazing. I mean, well, I should have mentioned the final girl earlier, actually, as one of the, huge, very important kind of classic elements of this film. I love Laurie Strode so much, and I think in many ways she kind of fits when you read like the early definition of what a kind of final girl is supposed to be, she does, in a lot of ways she fits that. She's kind of this, when we meet her, she's got her kind of school books and her cardigan, and she's kind of sexless in that she's not overtly sexy. She's shy around boys. She's very dependable. Like, she's the dependable babysitter. She's very mature. Guys think she's too smart to date. She's, this sort of really, of her friendship group, she's kind of plain and sensible.
She's the good girl from the friendship group. Like she's kind of made fun of by her friends for sort of, not being as sex obsessed as they are.
Yeah, they're pretty mean to her.
Yeah, I mean,
there's poking fun, and then there's like really going to town on it. They are a little bit, they call her like the old Girl Scout, don't they? And kind of, they're poking fun.
And you're right, like she does, I think like she pretty much establishes the blueprint for the archetype of the final girl. Like everything you've just said, kind of the weird and androgyny that kind of comes through in her name as well. The kind of sexless vibe, the fact that she's like the good girl from the group. And the other thing as well is like she's kind of not special except for the fact that she is the other sister of Michael Myers. Right? So she kind of needs to be killed, but she's also left for last. She's not the first one that he tries to murder, despite the fact that she's ultimately his goal.
Yeah. And is I guess I was trying to think like, why is she, well, we do know later, obviously, like siblings, there is a connection there, but it's like, why specifically in this is she the goal? Is it because, as a boy, he killed his sister? Did he kill her because she was busy having sex when she should have been looking after him? And is that, coming into play again? Is he going after, the babysitters that are sleeping around and hooking up with their boyfriends when they should be looking after children? And she's kind of, I try and make sense of that. Or what a
slut-shamey little boy.
I know. Well, that's basically what it is. It's like weirdly psychosexual, but also, like absolute slut-shamer. But it is this kind of logic of like, is the final girl left because she's the one with the kind of, the moral superiority? She's not having sex. She's, not like her other friends who are like super loose and like hang, whatever. But at the same time, Laurie isn't having sex, and she is, mature and dependable and intelligent and pretty savvy, but she's also smoking weed in the car. She's got her eye on a boy. Like, she does think about things like that. She's just got a lot on at the same time, but she kind of, I don't know. She's not for me, she's not entirely a good girl. She reminds me of me when I was younger. In that I was like, I do actually want the boy, but, you know, he's just not looking at me. And, you know, yeah, I am, you know, I'm pretty studious and but, you know, I've got other stuff going on as well. I just haven't quite had the opportunity for it yet.
But she's also got that thing where, similarly to Michael, like, she's the perfect counterpart because she is resourceful and relentless. Like, she
just keeps going.
She just keeps going. She just keeps running. And, like, we kind of have to talk. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis has been a long-standing fave of mine. This is definitely not the first film I saw her in. But every time I revisit her sort of work in horror, there is such an earnestness that comes through. Like, obviously she's incredibly young in this, so she fits this kind of late 70s teenager aesthetic and vibe perfectly well. And as Laurie develops as a character, and I love her in Halloween 2 as well, like, she does build on Laurie and everything that happens to her. So I think she, even from the first moment we see her, I never get the sense from Jamie Lee that she ever approached this role, or this film in particular, with any sort of derision towards genre or the role. It was always like with kind of the utmost earnestness about whether they're to do, and why Laurie is kind of, like you said, there's nothing really super special about her, which I kind of love. She is kind of marked by Michael Myers, but she didn't choose that. She just wants to go about her day, do her work, get the boy, smoke some weed, like, be a teenager. All this, like, massive slasher trauma that's inflicted upon her. She has to deal with it, but there's kind of nothing really special, really, about her, which I love.
Yeah, exactly. And the film really does spend quite a lot of time with her, getting to know her. Like, we've got all of those scenes where she's moving around the neighborhood, talking to her friends, you know, dropping off her dad's keys. Like, we really get kind of like quite a built up picture of her as a normal teenage girl. And yeah, and as you say, like, as time goes on, she has to put her kind of resourcefulness and her savvy to the test. She's kind of, and she builds as a person and becomes a stronger person. But she definitely didn't set out on this path. Although it sounds as if, you remember the bit where she's in the classroom and they're doing a lesson. I mean, two things actually in that. She's able to stare out of the window and pay absolutely no attention, but when the teacher calls on her, she knows the pitch perfect answer, which I'm always like, damn, this girl's really clever.
That was me in high school. I was like, it? Absolutely paid no attention, but I'll always have the answer.
You always got the textbook answer. Well done, sassy. If I was a teacher, I'd be like, God damn it.
Oh my God,
How did you do that? Try and catch you out.
I used to do the most horrifically obnoxious thing.
Oh, you little shit, did you?
I was a little shit. I used to have like quite long hair for most of my childhood and teenage years. And I'd like hide one single earbud up my shirt and through my hair and into one of my ears, and I would just always be listening to music while the lectures or the classes was on.
Oh my God, listen to music but also able to answer every question that was thrown at you.
Cocky little shit.
Anna, you're too cool. That's like, I love that.
No, I was a little shit. That's what I was.
You little shit. No, but you're pretty smug about it. I could tell. No, I think that's good. My other point was that they're in that conversation, the lesson, they're talking all about fate and how people are brought together, and it's fate that they're brought together. So yeah, again, there's this almost like a supernatural kind of these two people being brought together, and you know, there's nothing that Laurie could have done about it because this was just destiny for her. Sorry.
That's true. So she is kind of special, but in a way that she doesn't really want to be.
No, exactly.
You mentioned at the start that you love as well the story about how it was made. What about it like stands out to you?
I don't know. I think I've got a soft spot for the fact that it was like a really as you say, it was like Carpenter was kind of a big sci-fi fan, big Western fan, and he was asked to make this kind of low budget, quick win horror film about babysitters, being menaced by a stalker. And I really like the fact that he agreed to direct this film only if he could have kind of full creative control. So, writing, directing, scoring, everything had to be on his terms, which I kind of really love. He made it for like a tiny amount of money, and his relationship with Deborah Hill as well, I really liked. So he was dating, that was his then girlfriend, Deborah Hill, and she spent a lot of time working on like the script for the dialogue for the teenage girls in the film, so which I think really comes across.
Totally, yeah. So she I think wrote the original story, and like did all the dialogue. And I think Carpenter was kind of incapable of writing for teenagers or teenage girls.
I don't know girls.
Yeah.
I don't know girls.
Fair
I'll
enough.
do Loomis. You do, yeah.
Yes, I'll do the creepy therapist who's obsessed with this man child who loves to stab people. You do the normal people.
Yeah, you do the teenage girls. And I know for some people, maybe these teenage girls are a bit annoying when they're together, but I have a real affection for them, okay? I think they're great.
All teenage girls are annoying when they're together.
We're so annoying. I'm
Of course
sorry,
we
guys,
are.
but I was literally talking like this as a child. Well, not a child, but a teenager.
Yes.
Obsessing about, yeah.
Good for
just-
Deborah Hill. You captured how fucking annoying teenage girls are.
It's right. We are really annoying. Like, totally. Like, or, yeah. Just,
Oh my god,
it's real.
sorry.
Oh my god,
when are
totally.
you gonna go all the way?
That was spot on.
Listen, I can only do 2 accents. One of them is Valley Girl, one of them is generic Eastern European. So you got the Valley Girl today.
Oh, it's flawless.
Let's do the rest of the episode in our annoying Valley Girl, teenage girl
God.
voices. Laurie. I saw Michael
Annie.
looking at you.
Oh my god.
Laurie, I think he really likes you because he really has been stalking you for so
Oh my
long.
god.
I can just hear the listeners just drop off, be like, oh, I'm
turning
out.
the volume down, like, no, fuck this. This is... We're just demonstrating how annoying teenager girls can be.
Listen, I'm
obsessed with teenage girls. I just think teenage girls are the best, okay?
They are the best and super annoying. 2 things can be true at once.
I think it's true.
Please, you were talking about Deborah Hill.
Yes, what was I saying about Deborah Hill?
She wrote the dialogue for the teenage girls.
That's basically was my point. I really like that. I like, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about the music, but again, I love that he composed the music himself. And again, it feels very minimalist and kind of, I just love the way this came together and that it was like a small budget kind of seat of the pants, done in a few weeks kind of thing.
It's kind of like one of the, I don't think it gets spoken about as a low budget indie horror, but that is effectively what it was. And it's like one of the most amazing examples of what can be achieved with very tight direction on a minimal budget. Like, there is not a single wasted moment in this film. And crucially, every single shot and every single element of the way that everything is framed and shot makes complete sense and adds to the overall dread without having to really, rely on special effects or massive kill scenes. Like, the kills are fairly box standard. I think Nightmare on Elm Street is much more visually inventive.
Yes, it's
but this is
inventive,
formally very precise.
Yes, you're right. It cuts like a knife,
Yes.
like a stalker's knife. It does. You're right.
well
It's kind of. Thank you so much, so much. No, but you're right. Like, all of the elements come together, and they are all fairly. I'm not stripped down, but I keep saying minimalist. But it is. It's kind of.
It is.
It's like the slotting together of the filming and the music, and all of these elements combine and work so perfectly together, and. In a tight 90 minutes, we've got the overall structure of the film kind of, as I mentioned before, you get all of the backstory within kind of 10-15 minutes. You know, like everything's laid out in front of you. You know what's happening, and it just allows the tension to build throughout basically one day. It's kind of that one day in Halloween, isn't it? So just the daytime through to the evening, just, I don't know, it's just perfectly tight. And as you say, there doesn't seem to be a moment that's kind of wasted.
And I wanted to ask as well, kind of on that, we've spoken about the films that it kind of takes from, but where have you seen the influence of Halloween on subsequent horror films?
Well, I don't know if you've heard of a film called Scream.
Oh, I don't think I have. I think I might have to look it up. How do you spell Scream?
S-K-R. No, I mean, that is a bit of a jump because obviously we had Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street quite soon afterwards, didn't we? They were only a couple of years afterwards. So they're, as I said before, they feel like the kind of the core, they're like the holy triangle of slashers. But then we've got that whole other cycle that kicks off kind of in the 90s, which are much more kind of self-referential and feature well-known actors. And that's the cycle that I got really into as a teenager. And you've got I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend. And they seem to draw, I mean, so much on this film. But then we've also had films kind of recently, like It Follows, which we mentioned, David Robert Mitchell, which is 2014, which feels like the most Halloween-esque. I mean, it's one of my favourite films of the last kind of like, I don't know, 15 years or something. I absolutely love that film, but it just feels like a complete homage to Halloween in terms of the setting, the story, the music, everything. And what was the other one I was thinking of? House of the Devil as well, the Ty West film. That feels like it's very influenced by this as well. But I mean, I think the key with Halloween really is that it showed that filmmakers and studios that the key with Halloween really is that it showed filmmakers and studios that hugely effective and successful films could be made on a small budget, which is why, you know, John Carpenter is known as sort of like the king of kind of cult filmmaking as well, is that you can do so much on so little. And his influence has pretty much seeped across all genres of filmmaking. But yeah, I mean, obviously I think primarily of those kinds of slasher films.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of like it kind of really kickstarted a whole, you know, generation of slasher filmmaking, of like horror filmmaking that centers around teens as well. I think that's one of the key things about it for me, is that
of course,
centering teenagers at the story and them not just being kind of props. And that came back full force. It kind of exhausted itself in the 80s, I think. Even Halloween became like a franchise that went in weird directions.
Yeah, the 70s and 80s are like stuffed with those films, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got like Sleepaway Camp and Texas Chainsaw Massacre was earlier, like My Bloody Valentine and Prom Night and all of these films. And I think I read it was something that like sometime in the 80s, like early 80s, it was like 60% of all box office takings that year were for slasher movies or something, like those kind of teen-orientated, teen-marketed films.
They were huge.
Just absolutely exploded. And you can imagine just like thousands of teenagers. I mean, I would have loved to have gone to the cinema back then to see these films because it would have been such an atmosphere.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It was it was oversaturated for a time.
Yeah, like horror had been sort of seen as schlocky up until that point, and then it became massive and super financially successful, and then it tired itself out with all the endless franchising, and then it kind of the cycle started up again with Scream in 96, which, you know, will by the time this goes out, this will already be out, but we're doing a screening of Scream in October with a live podcast recording, so that will happen. That will be amazing to watch on a big screen. I've never seen it on a big screen, but you can very clearly see the Halloween kickstarted the first slasher craze and established a lot of rules of the genre in 78, and then Scream really reignited a whole new golden era of teen-centered horror films. Each one of them kind of, you know, from the big classics that we love, like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, all of the holiday themed ones as well.
Of course, yeah. There's a whole subcategory, isn't there, of holiday themed films.
Totally. And like they also did the thing that Halloween did, which is like center on the lives of teenagers and have these not supernatural but unstoppable forces that just keep trying to get at them. Obviously Scream is probably one of the best, if not just one of the best.
So good.
I cannot wait to revisit that franchise. But it's, we haven't really spoken about the music, and I think we really need to talk about the music because it is, I don't know, is it the most iconic soundtrack for any horror film ever next to Psycho?
It's gotta be, hasn't it? It just it's the music for Halloween is just insane. And again, it's so few instruments actually being used. Like Carpenter is very known for his use of synthesizers, obviously, at this point, and he's got his own kind of musical career now as well, which
he does
very similar, which I do like. Actually, I'm pretty behind that.
I really like it. I've seen him live. He's amazing.
Have
live.
You?
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that was so good.
It was amazing. It was pretty great. Yeah, he just played
really like to see that.
He had several screens that were playing like edited versions of his films, basically in tune with the music that he was playing.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah, he's a great musician. He really is. I think he grew up kind of, listening. I think his father was a musician or a professor or something. So he spent a lot of time, around music, and he composes and performs his own music. And this, I think I read that the music for Halloween was sort of inspired a bit by Suspiria and The Exorcist, and also maybe Psycho was mentioned as well. So he sort of cited those as kind of influences. But the opening, the main theme, which I'm not a musical expert at all, so I can't even begin to explain the structure of it. It would be very bad. But it's that kind of, there's like a 5/4 meter that's really, it's like very, very distinctive, but doesn't feel right. And it's also the constant whirring percussion in the background. Do you know what I mean? It almost sounds like an air conditioner or something in the background that's like constantly chugging. And that, if I tune too much into that, it actually makes me feel quite anxious and sick. Like it's almost like it mimics Michael Myers in that it's never ending. It just keeps circulating round and round and round, and it just really seeps into you and is terrifying. But yeah, introduced this kind of idea of a killer having a theme tune as well, which I really loved. And then of course the rest, you've got this kind of piano melody and the synthesizer that's used you get these really effective moments, like in the opening when the light goes off at the opening. Judith turns the light off in the bedroom upstairs, and you get that kind of like all is silent, and then that like jangly synthesizer suddenly kicks in and makes you jump. And the music is so closely tied to the tension in this film. And I know that John Carpenter had said at some point that he had screened the film and it didn't have the music with it, and I think Deborah Hill had said that it didn't scare her at all. And it was only adding the music back in that kind of saved it and made the film scary. So it's so closely, the effectiveness of this film is so closely tied to that score.
Oh my God, you're so right. And it's still like, even without like seeing the images, if I hear the Halloween soundtrack. First of all, I started doing a very bad like synthesizer imitation, like John Carpenter.
I was just doing that. How did you know?
Great podcast content, Seb. But just imagine us doing a John Carpenter imitation playing the synths. That's what it looks like. But obviously much younger, much hotter.
Just two Valley girls playing synthesizer over here.
Exactly that. But I instantly just get into this hunched, place of like, oh fuck, someone's looking at me, someone's hunting me, and it's all in the music.
The paranoia kicks in. Doesn't it? Yeah,
you're so right about this being kind of the theme tune for a killer. I love it. Like, and also I love the how it's influence what we expect from a horror soundtrack, and obviously I can see the goblin-esque vibe of it as well, and the Argento vibe of it as well. But I I still like, there's few films that I instantly have this relationship with the music, where it's like, shit, especially within horror in particular. We're quite used to, I think, like grand melodies and theme tunes for bigger franchises and films, but for something to be so iconic of a particular time, of a particular era, a genre, and a specific killer character all at the same time, hot damn, John, like that's a hell of a theme tune.
Yeah, he did all right, really, didn't he?
Yeah. Did good,
he did
John.
all right.
Yeah.
He did. Well
Not
done.
Bad. Well done, John. Well done,
B+
John and
for
Deborah.
effort. Yeah, you did very, very well.
And kind of before we talk maybe very briefly about the sequels and the remakes and stuff, we kind of haven't really talked about Dr. Sam Loomis at all. And I feel
Lovely
like
Dr. Sam Loomis.
we cannot not talk about Dr. Sam Loomis.
He is so funny. He is the absolute, like, he's the comedy aspect of this film for me. I just think he's absolutely...
He's so sincere.
If Sam Loomis was played by anyone else, I just don't think it would work. But it's because it's Donald Pleasance that it's such a funny mode of... He's just absolutely hilarious. His mode of speaking, it's just, even from the beginning, the way he's just sort of like waving around his hands and running around shouting, like, the evil is gone! Like, it's just this absolutely bizarre man who's arrived in town and is like ordering the sheriff's department around and talking in very dramatic ways about evil and death. Like, he's absolutely batshit, but very sincere.
He is so OTT.
Yeah. Is it supposed to be funny? Are we supposed to laugh at him? I think he's funny.
The thing is, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's totally earnest, but I think it really, really works because you can kind of see Loomis as being, by the way, another Psycho reference. Everybody knows this, but for anyone who might not have picked it up, like, Loomis is also the name of Janet Leigh's boyfriend character in Psycho, and then becomes the name of another character in Scream. So we love the Loomis. But anyway, I think Donald Pleasance, who plays him, like, I think he plays him as a man who has become so obsessed with Michael, with figuring him out, and is so obsessed with this idea of like having found someone who is, like he calls him, the embodiment of true evil, that he can't let it go. Like, I don't think he actually wants to kill Michael. I think he just endlessly wants to look into that darkness and be close to it, even though he finds it so terrifying. So I think that, like, OTT levels of performance actually makes sense with the character. Like, he is not a well man. He is not
You're
okay.
Right. Yeah, he's fully lost the plot a bit, hasn't he? Because he's spent so much time studying this strange, inhuman creature. But he's also the only one that really brings gravity to the situation, in that everyone is kind of like, that's fine, it'll be all right. And he's like, no, it really fucking won't. Like, it will not be okay. Like, please take this seriously. It's not just some, like, I know he's only, how old would he have been in this? Like, he's in his early 20s, Michael Myers, in this, isn't it? It's like, he's not just some, like, random dude that's broken out. This is not okay.
Yeah, like, did I tell you that he killed his sister when he was, like, 5? This is
not... Hello?
Yeah, this guy means business. And also, like, listen to me. I'm a doctor.
Right.
And I've got, I've got an accent. I'm very serious.
I've got a very serious accent. I am a doctor. It is very funny to see a psychiatrist walking around kind of talking in very grand, dramatic ways about the nature of evil and death. Like,
I love it.
It's just the sheriff. But the sheriff takes him seriously eventually. He's kind of like, no, actually...
The sheriff and Dr. Sam Loomis are both fucking drama queens, and I love them for it.
They are so dramatic. But also, I think they're the only adults in this film. Like, where the fuck are the adults? Like, that's a
They're not there!
There's no one here. I mean, it's another quite a key, like,
yes.
Where are your children? You're not looking after them. There are no adults in this film, and that kind of feels like a trope as well. I mean, it differs between films, but there are definitely films that come after this, especially teen horror films, where, the parents are very much absent.
Yeah.
And even when Laurie's, like, running down the street screaming, people were just kind of closing their blinds to her and going, nope, I'm not having a part of this. So there's, like, a total disregard. There's no responsibility taken here. The parents are just AWOL.
Oh yeah, their parents are probably like, off somewhere drinking cocktails and having like orgies or something.
Yeah, well, it's that kind of latchkey kid-esque kind of. I guess it's emblematic of its time in that way, and that it's kids were just, I don't know, letting themselves in and out of the house apparently around this time, just walking themselves to school. Like,
well,
I don't know.
It's American suburbia as well. Although to
Right.
be fair, and I think we spoke about this in our Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode as well. The 70s are kind of, a big serial killer moment in the United States of America. So it is kind of interesting that like this is the period where the slasher film also had its first kind of golden age, when in America in particular, I can't really speak for most. America has like an outstanding amount of serial killers per capita.
You do.
Like
Done.
it's quite
Gold
it's
stuff.
quite something. Like I remember listening to a podcast about it, and the statistics were something like bizarre. Like, with the second country with the most serial killers per capita was like, I don't know, 90, and then America was like 3,000. It's something absurd like that.
Yeah.
So in the 70s is where a lot of these people were being, not that they were, killing necessarily all at that time, but there was an overlap between like quite deadly people. And I do find it interesting, like they are by themselves a lot, but it's also a time where people were not yet culturally, I think, so afraid of people close to them.
No, and that's the whole. That's kind of like the Ted Bundy-esque thing, isn't it? Like Ted Bundy, like Mike Myers in a way, is kind of he's in amongst you. He's built into your community. He's one of you, and yet he's actually, this extremely evil person. He just doesn't seem that way on the surface. And Michael Myers is kind of, just a kid who's grown up in this area and is capable of doing some like truly evil thing. It's like homegrown evil. And yeah, I love this idea. Actually, this is one of my favorite things about this film, is this idea of evil lurking in safe spaces, and that use of the sort of the suburban streets as the setting. Like I don't think I can look at an American tree-lined street like that now and not think of Halloween.
Oh, 100%.
Perfectly normal, quiet, uneventful, small town area with children and families going trick-or-treating. You get those amazing tracking shots at the beginning with Laurie sort of walking across town. You get this real sense of kind of community, and Laurie's watching the kids trick-or-treating in the sunshine, and everyone lives really close to each other. They're babysitting across the road, and it's kind of business as usual for a good third of this film. It's kind of daytime and everything's very safe and as expected, and that entire idea of sort of the American dream that's being projected, which just completely folds in on itself.
Yeah, and I love that idea of kind of danger lurking in suburbia and in the home, because it's really quite menacing and it's quite insidious. And it's something that will come up over and over again in some filmmakers, like David Lynch, for instance, like has the great opening of Blue Velvet, where it's just this beautiful white picket fence, a picture perfect postcard of Americana, and then you zoom in on the grass and there's a rotting ear of someone.
Yes.
And it's kind of this thing that I love of like, yes, everything can be pristine and picture perfect and kind of according to this idea of normality and perfection that has been crafted through this idea of the American dream. But then there's this danger lurking in plain sight, and because you're too obsessed with maintaining this idea of Americana, you're not seeing the danger that's kind of right in front of you, right behind you in this case.
Yeah. There's that parent that literally closes the curtains or whatever on Laurie screaming. It's like, no, we're not facing this.
Yep.
This is like, no, this is ruining my perfectly manicured front garden. Like, I can't be dealing with this at all.
And we don't have to talk too much about them, but I did want to kind of ask you your thoughts about the franchise that came after Halloween. I mean, I guess there's a really distinct separation between Halloween 2, which came very quickly after the first one and was also made by Carpenter. No, sorry, and that wasn't made by
Carpenter.
It was written by him, yeah. Actually, no, I think it was written by Deborah Hill. Anyway,
Oh.
anyway, there's a really distinct separation between like Halloween 2, which wasn't directed by Carpenter, but it did have Deborah Hill involved as a writer and as a producer, and kind of picks up directly after the ending of the first one. And then like Halloween 3, which is a completely different film, and there's like witches and stuff involved, and then the franchise really began, and it got really fucking weird. Yeah. The only really connective tissue of this is always Michael Myers, and it's always Dr. Sam Loomis.
Right. Loomis is he in every single sequel? I think he is, maybe?
I think he is in every single sequel.
Yeah, it's so Halloween 2. No, hang on, I'm gonna start again. So I think the Halloween, kind of the sequels and the entire franchise is really interesting because for a first film that is so fantastic and kind of perfect in my eyes, really the sequels are they're not great. There are many, many bad kind of sequels following this film, but Halloween 2 is kind of, I think it's okay. Like, I do enjoy it for what it is. It works quite well as you say, like as a follow-on from the first film. I think it loses some of the, I mean, I feel really enamored with the characters in the first film, and you spend that time getting to know them, and I really like them, which you kind of lose in this second film. But it's still like it holds up as a fairly good sequel. And then Halloween 3 I wouldn't even regard as a sequel. I like to think of that as a complete standalone. I think if you go into that expecting a proper Michael Myers sequel, you'll be kind of sorely disappointed. It's like this weird attempt to kind of anthologize the idea of Halloween, isn't it? And
different stories that take place on the night of Halloween.
Feels more like a kind of sci-fi invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing. Instead, it's very. So again, I quite like it, but it isn't.
I really like it, but it is weird.
It's weird, and it's fine. I think if you regard it as not a Halloween,
it's like it's a standalone film.
Yeah,
like
it's a complete.
Not,
yeah. If you can regard it as completely separate, I think it's pretty good. Then I have to admit that I have seen Halloween 4, but I don't remember it. And then
sounds about right.
I think there's a big gap in my knowledge. And is there 5 and then H2O? Is that how it works? I can't remember. Oh my
good God, no! There is 4.
How many are there?
There is 4 where Michael Myers returns.
That's the return,
because they figured out that Season of the Witch is like the anthology vibe was just not working for them.
It's like, that didn't work.
Yeah. Then there's Halloween 5, which is the revenge of Michael Myers. So
haven't seen that one.
At this point, Michael Myers is the main kind of attraction point, and his name is included in almost every kind of title. Then my favorite one is Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers.
Oh, of course.
Which is the one with Paul Rudd and the runes.
Yes, that's the runes one. Yes.
And then we get H2O, which I think every single subsequent iteration of the franchise has like completely erased everything that happens in H2O.
I think it's quite beloved in a way as well.
Yeah.
Like, I've got a soft spot for it, but yes, you're right. I don't know what it is about these films though. They just couldn't really nail a good sequel to Halloween for a very long time.
Like I think they just overcomplicated it, and even though like I have a soft spot for Halloween 6 because it is just one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen, and it's got baby Paul Rudd, Paul Rudd who looks exactly like middle-aged Paul Rudd as well.
Timeless.
Honestly, a Time Lord vampire, just extreme moisturizer. Who knows? And Halloween H2O was like H2O. Halloween H20. H2O.
H20?
No one ever says H20. We all say H2O.
I was going to say, is it H20?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's Halloween H20, 20 years later. That's the full title. I'm looking at it right now. It is the dumbest ass title I've ever seen for a sequel.
I always wondered what it had to do with like... Yeah,
I hope someone got fired, basically.
I've always called it Halloween H2O.
So am I. I figured out just now, just a second, that it's probably mispronounced.
Something. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm not gonna start calling it Halloween H20. That's stupid.
I was like, what has this got to do with water, really? I don't know.
I know, who knows? But Laurie does come back. That was a big deal for that film. Also, it's Josh Hartnett, but
Yes.
we will be covering Halloween H2O in the series later on because
Spoil it then.
I think it's a perfect intersection of the 90s teen slasher
Yes.
cycle and the original one that Halloween started in all the wrong ways.
All of it.
But yeah, and what do you think about the two separate reinventions?
Oh God, you don't mean the Rob Zombie ones, do you?
Yeah, I do mean the Rob Zombie ones.
Yeah, so we had the 2007 remake, and then we went from sequels to remakes, reinventions, didn't we? Which were, I mean, I like Rob Zombie as a musician. I've got a real soft spot for Rob Zombie, can't help it. But these are bad films. Yeah. Bad films.
Yeah.
To the point where, again, I can't really remember them other than them being very bad.
What I remember from, I don't think I saw his Halloween 2, which came out in 2009, but I did see Halloween from 2007. And I just remember that it kind of went the complete opposite way of Halloween, which, is a choice.
Well, it's very Rob Zombie-esque, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't, it's, Rob Zombie's not going to make a kind of, I don't know, minimalist.
No.
Shiny.
I do remember it was like trying to over psychoanalyze Michael Myers. So it was giving him a lot of reasons.
It's
very
too much backstory.
Exploitative reasons as to why he became a killer. And you know what? I like my serial killers without that much baggage. I like this idea of like, you know what? I'm just into killing, guys. It's my thing.
It's the lack of reason that's scary.
Yeah, that's what's scary. Yeah.
If I'm told why it happens, it's just not the same. It needs to just be.
Yeah. And I don't think Rob Zombie is the filmmaker that I want to explore what intense psychological childhood trauma does to a person.
No.
Yeah, although it does have Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Loomis, which is always a treat.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
And bad times, though. Just not good.
No, would not advise. But what did you make of the David Gordon Green Halloween?
I went into that film thinking that I really, really wasn't going to like it. I was being very sniffy, probably because, yes, all of these other films have not been very good. And then I think it slightly helped that they were it was a direct sequel to the original, so they were disregarding all other sequels. They are no longer canon, which was quite nice. I thought, okay, I can get behind this. And of course, Carpenter had kind of given his thumbs up as well, which was like gave me slight hope. So do you know what I like? I gave Podcasters a very bad name.
Oh, I love that scene.
Oh, good Lord. I was like, hey now, we're not that annoying. Jesus Christ. The Podcasters in that. But do you know what? I did like it to an extent. I actually thought it was better than I expected, and I could just really get behind, again, Laurie Strode and this idea of kind of generational trauma and the fact that she was, she's a woman whose entire life has been dictated by this horrific moment, and that she's, everyone that, including her own daughter, thinks that she's just completely balmy, but she knows that he's going to come back. She's got that, she's planning for it, and she's getting her shit together because she knows she's the final girl and that he's going to return. And so actually I liked it more than I expected. What did you think?
I kind of really agree with you. I was sniffy at first, and I was very pleasantly surprised, especially by the way that they treat Laurie Strode's character. Like the basic premise, as you mentioned, it kind of disregards all of the previous sequels, and it kind of picks up almost directly from the first two films, and it's all about Laurie and Michael. And what I really loved is that you really see the intense baggage that it's left on Laurie, and how it has affected her own family, her relationship with her daughter, her relationship with her granddaughter. And I think it really twists things around and kind of embraces that she's become a completely different person that she would have been if she hadn't been hunted down by Michael Myers when she was a teenager. And it dives into that. And I love that. Like, I love that respect for what the original was doing, and kind of the filmmaking aspect of that. And it was updating it, but kind of not really forcing Rob Zombie has a style, and he forces it on everything, whether it makes sense or not. And I think this was much more like, there's enough nods to fans of the original.
Mm-hmm.
There's respectful homages. There's obviously, a much better understanding of who the characters are and where they could potentially be 40 years after the fact of, the events of the first film.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's just like better writing, better filmmaking, and better understanding of what Halloween achieved.
Yeah, you're completely right. I agree, yeah. And it made sense to me that film was coming out now. It felt fitting. Like, I hate to stay in the wake of sort of, like Me Too movement or whatever, but we are having more open conversations about like the way women experience violence from men on a daily basis, and this idea of kind of inherited trauma and the way that victims, their whole lives are affected by these things. So it kind of, I don't know, it felt like a good time for that to happen as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to see kind of what's going to happen in Halloween Kills.
Yeah, me too. I'm really interested. Again, I feel a little bit, I don't know, I should feel reassured, but I'm not entirely sure. I do find it interesting, actually. I was thinking about this the other day, that, I mean, obviously we're very aware of the final girl trope now, and we've kind of moved into this space where it's being subverted and changed to kind of reflect today's, social climate or whatever. But we've had like more examples recently, it feels, with kind of like Fear Street and Ready or Not of the final girl resurfacing. And also a thing that I've noticed is that the final girls become really popular in fiction at the moment with male authors. So we've had like Final Girls with Riley Sager, Last Final Girl, Stephen Graham Jones, the Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I mean, I haven't read all of those, but it was just it's merely an observation that it's interesting that there's a lot of like male authors at the moment writing about final girls.
I find it very curious that you bring
that
odd,
up, isn't it?
Because I've only read one of those books. I've got the Grady Hendrix books on my like wish list that needs to arrive at some point, or I need to buy it at some point. But I do feel a little bit iffy because of that. Because of the fact that it's always male authors.
It's all men, isn't it? Which I was kind of like, and I mean, the other funny thing, but I actually, as writers, those three writers that I've just mentioned, I have read a lot of their work and I enjoy their work, but I still find it a little bit odd that they are all deciding to kind of play on this final girl trope at the moment. So I don't know. I can't comment much more. I just found it interesting that
I do find it interesting as well. It's something I've observed too. And actually, when I read the Riley Sager novel, which is just called The Final Girls, I believe I was under the impression, and I believe the idea when it was being promoted at the time, and I think this was like 2018, something like that, was that it was a female author.
Oh, interesting.
So I think originally
I
he was writing in a pen name, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think I still have the original, the proof that they sent me, and I think like it was, I'd have to double check, but I was definitely under the impression that it was like a female author. Yeah.
It's an really interesting choice that this like idea of the final girl, the last girl standing, has suddenly become quite, I don't know,
appealing,
not
to
fashionable, but very appealing to male writers in particular.
I do find it curious. I think there is something in there, and I don't quite know why, and I'd have to read the other books. But exactly. I think I do like also listen to a lot of author-led podcasts, especially kind of around the thriller or genre space, and I think a lot of the women who are writing those stories are kind of writing about killers instead of final girls.
Interesting. We've done a swap.
Yeah.
Oh,
also all up for that.
Yeah. There's a whole like PhD dissertation that needs to happen there.
There's
I'm not
a whole
do it,
something there. Yeah, no, somebody will. When you do, please email me. I would like to read it, but I'm not going to write it.
Someone tell us very eloquently, because it's not going to be me.
And Steph, before we wrap up, is there anything about Halloween that we haven't talked about that you wanted to mention?
I don't think so. Just that, I mean, surely everyone has seen this film by now, but I just, I think if you haven't seen it recently, definitely go back and revisit it, because every time I do, I find something new to be quite impressed by, and I just have so much love for this film.
Absolutely. And I think like as a lesson in framing and intention building, it's just there's few films that are so tightly made as this.
That's what I want my horror films to be. I mean, I'm also a fan of kind of jump scares and, all of the other bits and pieces. But actually, for me personally, the most effective horror films are the ones that make you feel claustrophobic, anxious, tense. They're relentless. It's that kind of feeling that I'm always kind of trying to chase when I'm watching horror films, and I'm always wanting to go back for. And as you say, like, this is just such an iconic film for that.
Absolutely. Steph, thank you so much for your time and for your insights on Halloween. And where can people find more of your work online?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Steph X McKenna. And also, I'm going to give a shout out to my Stephen King zine, which is Outsider. So if you're into Stephen King, please do follow at Outsider Zine as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.